real world results then is this is with Schneider Electric. And in 2002, their injury rate was about 3.6 per 100 employees. So when we were talking about this earlier, we talked about in 2006, the state of Montana started following it. And at that time, the national rate was somewhere around 4.8 or something along those lines, okay? So when they looked at that, they were sitting there going, you know, we're doing pretty good because we're way below the national rate, but we think we can do better. So they doubled down on safety. They went ahead and started looking for other areas they could improve upon, other areas that they thought that they could make some progress in. So a little bit more than a decade later, they managed to get their injury rate down to 3.1. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it certainly did have a lot of input into them in the fact that if you do the math, they prevented over 900 injuries over that decade, just at 0.5. That's important. Their annual savings, of course, went to up to $15 million in just direct cost alone. So now take that $15 million, and you know they made more than that back in indirect costs. So there really is a savings when you're going through with safety. Now, Alcoa, over a 5-year period, their sales grew 15%, which of course accounted for their earnings increase from 20 cents a share to $1.41 a share. Because when your sales grow, you're going to get more investment, and people are going to see you doing things the right way. So over 10 years, this company saw a significant drop in their injury rate. OSHA has what they call the VPP program, which is Voluntary Protection Programs. And in their program participation, they have noticed that they have a 50% lower rate with those companies that are willing to invest in safety, that they see that they have 50% less injuries. So it counts a lot, doesn't it? When you start looking and you start throwing these numbers out there. Now, these are a little bit bigger. It's hard to relate these to smaller companies. Well, that's those bigger companies, but we're a small organization. It's not going to have as much effect to us, but it will in the long run, okay? So to sell safety, my suggestion to you is that you have to, first of all, know the boss. A lot of bosses, they are numbered, but not every boss sees those numbers, just like I was talking about. You know, well, that's those large companies. Of course, they're going to see more savings than I ever will. But the point is that if you start selling it, you need to understand what makes a difference with them, okay? So numbers, of course, are a motivator in this process. You know, greater productivity, less injuries, you're going to get more money back, you're going to sell more, you're going to make more, those kind of things. But you also have to understand how to adjust your approach. Now, I used to have a bureau chief, and my boss always talked about the fact that he had to plant the seed. He didn't like to move real fast on things. He wanted to think it over. So the boss would go in there one day and he'd just plant the seed. You know, just make a couple comments. And then he'd come back the next week and he'd water it and fertilize it, have a little bit more discussion. And over a period of time, hopefully he'd grow this thing into a plant and into an idea. And eventually down the road, he'd like to see this become fruition. And a lot of people don't have patience for that, you know. So you kind of have to take into account how your boss needs to be approached, because that's the only way you're going to make money with this guy, was to be able to kind of give him some time to think about it. And I do understand that, because a lot of people, it's a whole lot easier to say no than yes, right? Because if I say no, then I'm not spending money, now I'm not having to do things. So if I say no right off the get-go, that gives me time. But if you give them time to think about it and they can process the information, then that makes the sell a little bit easier too, okay? So always adjust your approach. Now, the other thing to kind of keep in mind is the numbers, they're dangerous, all right? When you use strictly numbers, if that's how you sell it and those numbers don't come right back at you right away, what's going to happen? It didn't work. It may be working, but because you didn't see the numbers. And we kind of had that happen with our WorkSafe champions. We had a particular class that, you know, they were selling it on the numbers. They were saying, look at what we're doing with the numbers. And we said, don't do it by the numbers. If you do it by the numbers, we're going to get bit by the numbers. So let's focus in on what we're actually accomplishing. And I think that's where our discussion is now going with our WorkSafe champions. What do we want to measure? Because the numbers are impressive, but you can't rely strictly on that message, okay? So the biggest thing you want to sell this on is the fact that it's the human capital. You do not want to see people get hurt. That's the simple fact of the matter. You want people to come to work with the same fingers and toes and leave at the end of the day with those same fingers and toes. That's the point. They come to work, and everything they came to work with, they leave at the end of the day with the same things, okay? They don't lose any hearing. They don't lose any body parts. they're happy and they're accomplished and they're getting those things done that you need to have done. Okay. Rich Widowson, again with Schneider Electric, said, I hate going into the dollar savings. They're there. That's not why we do it. We do it because we don't do it because of the dollars. We do it because of the people, because that's that engagement piece again. That's that caring piece again that we were talking about. When we talk about the engagement piece, this is how you get people in. When they understand that you care about them and you're taking action to make sure that they're safe at the end of the day, they respect that. That gets them involved. That's that personally caring part. That's how you sell safety. Will it happen overnight? Probably not. Sometimes it's how to, it's like how you make a pearl, right? It sits in there for a while and the acid, and you knock off some corners and it keeps spinning around and keeps polishing it. And that's how kind of safety is approached. Is sometimes with some people, that's what you have to do. It's a slow approach. It's a deliberate approach. But it's something that you have to work long and hard at. It's not something that happens overnight. But if you don't start taking the steps now, where are you going to end up at in the end?